The rain hit so hard against the window pane that Nathan early thought the glass might shatter, and he wondered if any soul foolish enough to be caught outside in this tempest would survive the night. His cabin sat 3 miles outside Sierra Vista, Arizona territory, a modest structure he had built with his own hands 5 years ago when he decided ranching suited him better than drifting. The year was 1883, and Nathan had seen his share of storms in his 28 years, but this one carried a particular violence that made even his sturdy walls groan under the wind's assault. He was pouring his second cup of coffee when he heard it, a sound that barely registered above the thunder but distinct enough to make him pause. A horse's whinny, high and frightened. Nathan set down his cup and moved to the door, pressing his ear against the wood. There it was again, closer this time, and beneath it, something else. A human voice calling out. Without hesitation, Nathan grabbed his coat and yanked open the door. The wind nearly tore it from his hinges as rain lashed his face with stinging force. Through the deluge, he could make out a shape, a horse rearing up, and a figure struggling to control the animal. Nathan ran into the storm, his boots immediately sinking into mud that had been dry earth just hours before. "Easy now," he called out, approaching with his hands visible. The horse was a bay mare, eyes rolling white with terror. The rider was fighting to stay mounted, and as Nathan got closer, he realized with surprise that it was a woman. Her hat had blown away somewhere, leaving her dark hair plastered to her face and neck. She was soaked through, shivering so violently he could see it even through the darkness. "Let me help you," Nathan shouted over the wind. "My cabin is right there. You need to get inside." The woman looked down at him, and even in the dim light spilling from his open door, he could see the desperation in her eyes. She nodded, and Nathan reached up to help her dismount. She practically fell into his arms, her legs giving out the moment her feet touched the ground. He caught her, one arm around her waist, and felt how badly she was trembling. "Can you walk?" he asked. "I think so," she managed through chattering teeth. Nathan kept his arm around her while grabbing the mare's reins with his free hand. Together, they struggled through the mud to his cabin. Once inside, Nathan quickly tied the horse to a post under the small covered area he used for his own mount, making sure she had some shelter from the worst of the storm. Then he hurried back inside and shut the door against the howling wind. The woman stood in the middle of his cabin, dripping water onto his floor, looking lost and utterly exhausted. Now that they were in the light, Nathan could see her more clearly. She was young, probably in her early 20s, with dark hair that would likely fall in waves once it dried. Her riding clothes were of good quality but completely soaked, and she held her arms wrapped around herself in a futile attempt to stop shaking. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," Nathan said, already moving to his chest of drawers. "You will catch your death otherwise." "I do not have anything else," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've got some things that will work for now." He pulled out one of his shirts and a pair of trousers that would be far too large for her but would at least be dry. "Here, you can change behind that screen there." He gestured to the corner where a simple wooden screen provided the only privacy his one-room cabin offered. She took the clothes with hands that shook so badly she nearly dropped them. "Thank you," she said, and there was such genuine gratitude in those two words that Nathan felt something shift in his chest. He turned his back to give her additional privacy and busied himself stoking the fire in the hearth. He could hear the rustle of wet fabric being removed, the soft sounds of someone trying to move quietly despite being exhausted. When she emerged from behind the screen, she looked almost childlike in his oversized clothes, the shirt hanging to her knees, the trousers rolled up several times at the ankles. "Sit by the fire," Nathan said, pulling his only chair closer to the hearth. "I will make you something hot to drink." She sank into the chair gratefully, and Nathan saw her close her eyes as the warmth from the fire began to reach her. He put a pot of water on to heat and measured out ingredients for coffee, then added a bit of whiskey to a cup. When the water was hot enough, he poured it over the mixture and handed it to her. "Drink this slowly," he said. "It will help warm you from the inside." She wrapped both hands around the cup and took a careful sip. "This is very kind of you," she said after a moment. "I did not know if I would find shelter in time." "What in God's name are you doing out in this storm?" Nathan asked, pulling up a stool to sit nearby. "Sierra Vista is 3 miles from here, and there is nothing but open range between." "I was trying to reach my aunt's ranch," she explained, taking another sip. "I left Tucson this morning and the weather seemed fine when I started. By the time the clouds came in, I was already too far from town to turn back. I thought I could outrun it." She looked down at the cup in her hands. "That was foolish." "It was," Nathan agreed, but his tone was gentle. "Lucky for you, my cabin was in your path. There is nothing else out here for miles in any direction." "Very lucky," she said softly, meeting his eyes for the first time. Hers were green, he noticed, the color of new grass after rain. "I am Lillian Vance. My aunt is Catherine Vance. She owns the ranch about 10 miles west of here." "Nathan Early," he replied. "I know your aunt, or know of her anyway. Everyone around here does. She has one of the biggest spreads in the territory." He paused. "I did not know she had family coming to visit." "She does not know either," Lillian admitted, looking embarrassed. "I wrote her a letter, but I left Tucson before it could have reached her. I should have waited, but I needed to leave, and I thought surprising her might be better than giving her time to tell me not to come." There was a story there, Nathan could tell, but he did not press. Instead, he said, "Well, you are welcome to stay here until the storm passes. I am afraid I only have the one bed, but I can make myself comfortable by the fire." "I cannot take your bed," Lillian protested. "You have already done so much." "I insist," Nathan said firmly. "You have been through an ordeal and you need proper rest." "I have slept in far worse places than in front of a warm fire, I assure you." She looked like she wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was clearly winning. Her eyelids were drooping despite the coffee, and she swayed slightly in her chair. Nathan stood and offered his hand. "Come on," he said gently. "You can barely keep your eyes open." Lillian let him help her to her feet, and he guided her to his bed in the corner of the cabin. It was not much, just a simple frame with a corn husk mattress and wool blankets, but it was clean and dry. She sat down on the edge and Nathan pulled the blankets back for her. "Thank you," she said again, looking up at him with those green eyes. "I do not know what I would have done if I had not found your cabin." "Best not to think about that," Nathan said. "You are safe now. That is what matters." She slid under the blankets and Nathan pulled them up to her shoulders. Within moments, her breathing had deepened into sleep. He stood there for a moment, looking down at her. Even exhausted and with her hair still damp, she was beautiful. But more than that, there was something about her that drew him, a quality he could not quite name. Nathan shook his head and returned to the fire. Outside, the storm continued to rage, rain hammering against the roof and wind howling around the corners of the cabin. He poured himself another cup of coffee and settled onto the floor with his back against the wall, a blanket draped over his shoulders. Sleep would not come easily, not with a stranger in his cabin, even one as seemingly harmless as Lillian Vance. He found himself watching her as she slept, the gentle rise and fall of her breathing, the way her hand curled under her cheek like a child. What had driven her to leave Tucson so suddenly? What was she running from, or perhaps running toward? He realized he wanted to know. wanted to understand the story behind those sad green eyes. The night stretched on, and Nathan dozed fitfully, waking every time the wind hit the cabin with particular force or when thunder cracked overhead. Each time he woke, his gaze went to the bed, checking to make sure Lillian was still sleeping peacefully. She never stirred, so deeply asleep that even the storm's violence could not wake her. As dawn approached, the storm finally began to ease. The rain lessened from a deluge to a steady downpour, and the wind no longer threatened to tear the cabin apart. Nathan stood and stretched, his back stiff from the uncomfortable position. He quietly added wood to the fire and started preparing breakfast, moving carefully to avoid waking his guest. He was frying salt pork when he heard her stir. Glancing over, he saw Lillian sit up slowly, looking confused for a moment before memory returned. She ran a hand through her hair, which had dried in tangled waves around her face. "Good morning," Nathan said. "I hope you slept well." "I did," Lillian replied, surprise in her voice. "I cannot remember the last time I slept so soundly." She looked toward the window where gray morning light filtered through. "Is the storm over?" "Mostly," Nathan said. "Still raining, but the worst has passed." "I would not recommend traveling yet, though. The ground will be nothing but mud and the creeks will be running high. Best to wait until this afternoon at least." Lillian nodded, pushing back the blankets. "May I help with breakfast?" "Can you make biscuits?" Nathan asked. "I can," she said, standing and moving to join him. They worked together in comfortable silence, Nathan finishing the salt pork and eggs while Lillian mixed flour and lard for biscuits. She worked with practiced efficiency, her hands sure despite the borrowed clothes that kept threatening to slip off her shoulders. When the food was ready, they sat at Nathan's small table, the only sounds the crackling fire and the steady patter of rain on the roof. Lillian ate with the appetite of someone who had not had a proper meal in some time, and Nathan found himself wondering again about her circumstances. "This is delicious," Lillian said, reaching for another biscuit. "I did not realize how hungry I was." "Hungry and exhausted is a dangerous combination," Nathan observed. "Another reason you should not have been traveling alone." "I know," Lillian admitted, "but I did not have much choice." She paused, seeming to wrestle with whether to continue. Finally, she said, "I was engaged to be married." The wedding was supposed to be next month. Nathan felt something tighten in his chest, but kept his expression neutral. "What happened?" "I discovered that my fiancé was only interested in my father's money," Lillian said, her voice tight. "He already had a mistress, someone he had been seeing for years. He told me directly that love had nothing to do with marriage, that I was foolish to expect it. He said I should be grateful he was willing to marry me at all, that I was not pretty enough or charming enough to hope for better." Anger flared hot in Nathan's chest. "He sounds like a fool." Lillian looked up, surprise in her eyes. "Most people would say I was the fool for walking away. My father certainly thinks so. He told me I was being childish, that all men keep mistresses, that I needed to accept reality and stop dreaming." Her hands clenched around her fork. "So I left. I took what money I had saved, packed what I could carry, and left." "Your aunt knows all this?" "No," Lillian said. "I wrote her that I was coming for an extended visit, nothing more. I do not know what I will tell her when I arrive. The truth, I suppose. I am hoping she will let me stay with her, at least for a while, until I can figure out what to do next." Nathan leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Running away is not always the answer." "I am not running away," Lillian said, lifting her chin. "I am running toward something better. I refuse to spend my life with a man who sees me as nothing more than a transaction, who thinks so little of me that he cannot even pretend to care." Her eyes blazed with conviction. "I would rather be alone forever than accept that." "Good for you," Nathan said, and he meant it. That takes courage. Lillian's defiant expression softened into something more vulnerable. I am terrified, she confessed. I have no idea what I am doing. I have never been on my own before. Everything I know about ranching comes from visiting my aunt when I was a child. But I had to do something. I could not just stand there and let them decide my entire future without my consent. Your aunt will help you, Nathan said. From what I hear, Catherine Vance does not suffer fools, and she would not think you foolish for refusing to marry a man who did not respect you. I hope you are right, Lillian said quietly. They finished breakfast, and Lillian insisted on washing the dishes despite Nathan's protests. As she worked, he watched her move around his small cabin with growing ease as if she belonged there. The thought unsettled him. He had been alone for so long, content with his solitude, his simple life. He had loved once, years ago, but the woman had chosen someone else, someone with better prospects. After that, Nathan had convinced himself he was better off alone. But watching Lillian, hearing her speak with such passion about refusing to settle for less than she deserved, something stirred in him that he had thought long dead. She was brave and determined and, yes, beautiful, but it was more than that. There was a light in her, something that drew him like a moth to flame. Tell me about your ranch, Lillian said, interrupting his thoughts. She had finished the dishes and was drying her hands on a cloth. It is not much, Nathan said. 50 acres, about 30 head of cattle. I run it myself mostly, hire help during branding season. It is enough to keep me comfortable, nothing fancy. You built this cabin yourself? Lillian asked, looking around with apparent interest. I did, Nathan confirmed. Took me the better part of a year, working on it between jobs. I wanted something that was mine, something I had made with my own hands. It is a good cabin, Lillian said. Solid. It kept out that terrible storm without any trouble. That was the idea, Nathan said with a slight smile. Lillian walked to the window and looked out at the rain. It is beautiful out here, she said. So open. In Tucson, everything felt closed in, like the buildings were pressing down on me. Here you can breathe. That is why I stayed, Nathan said, moving to stand beside her. After years of drifting, moving from town to town, job to job, I found this place and knew I was home. I hope I can find that, Lillian said softly. A place where I belong. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the rain. Nathan was acutely aware of her nearness, the way her shoulder almost but not quite touched his arm, the faint scent of his soap on her skin. He wanted to reach out to touch her hand, but he held himself back. She was vulnerable, running from a broken engagement. The last thing she needed was another man complicating her life. But when she turned to look at him, her green eyes searching his face, Nathan felt something pass between them. Recognition, perhaps, or possibility. Whatever it was, it made his heart beat faster. Thank you, Lillian said again. Not just for the shelter, but for listening, for not telling me I was foolish. You are not foolish, Nathan said. You are brave. That is different. A flush colored her cheeks and she looked away, but she was smiling. Nathan cleared his throat and stepped back, needing to put some distance between them before he did something stupid. I should check on your horse, he said. Make sure she weathered the night all right. I will come with you, Lillian said quickly. They put on coats, Nathan finding an old one that had belonged to a ranch hand who had moved on. It was too big for Lillian, but it would keep her dry. Together, they stepped out into the rain, which had lessened to a light drizzle. The bay mare was standing under the shelter, looking much calmer than she had the night before. Lillian went to her immediately, stroking the horse's nose and speaking soft words of comfort. The horse nickered gently, clearly recognizing her mistress. Her name is Daisy, Lillian said, running her hands over the mare's legs, checking for any injuries. She has been with me since I was 18. My father gave her to me for my birthday. She is a good-looking animal, Nathan said, and he meant it. The mare had good conformation and kind eyes. She did well getting you here through that storm. She did, Lillian agreed, pressing her forehead against Daisy's neck for a moment. I was so frightened I might have pushed her too hard, that she might have been injured. Together, they checked the mare thoroughly and were relieved to find only minor scrapes that Nathan treated with salve from his supplies. By the time they returned to the cabin, the rain had stopped entirely, though the sky remained heavy with clouds. I think it is safe for you to continue to your aunt's ranch, Nathan said, though the words felt heavy in his mouth. He did not want her to leave, he realized. The cabin already felt too empty at the thought of her absence. I suppose I should go, Lillian said, but she did not move toward gathering her things. My aunt will be worried if I arrive too late in the day. She does not know you are coming, Nathan pointed out. True, Lillian admitted. She looked at him, and there was something hopeful in her expression. Unless the trail is too dangerous, you said the creeks would be running high. Nathan knew he should tell her it was fine, that the trail to the Vance ranch was well established and easy to follow, that she would have no trouble. Instead, he heard himself say, it might be safer to wait until tomorrow, give the water time to recede. Relief flashed across Lillian's face, so quick he might have missed it if he had not been watching her so closely. If you think that is best, she said. I do, Nathan said, and tried to ignore the voice in his head telling him he was making a mistake, that every hour she spent in his cabin would make it harder when she finally left. They spent the rest of the morning talking, and Nathan found himself sharing things he had not spoken of in years. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about the years he had spent drifting before finally settling in Arizona territory. Lillian listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she truly heard what he was saying. In turn, she told him about her childhood in Tucson, about her mother who had died when she was 12, about feeling alone even in a house full of servants and a father who was always busy with business. She spoke of summers spent at her aunt's ranch, the happiest times of her childhood, riding across open range and learning to rope cattle from the ranch hands. That is why I thought of coming here, Lillian explained. Aunt Catherine always made me feel like I mattered, like my opinions and feelings were important. She never told me that my only value was in who I might marry. She sounds like a remarkable woman, Nathan said. She is, Lillian agreed. I hope I have not presumed too much, thinking she would take me in. From what I hear, she will be happy to have you, Nathan assured her. As afternoon faded into evening, Nathan taught Lillian how to play cards, and they spent hours at his small table, the cabin warm from the fire, their laughter filling the space. Nathan could not remember the last time he had laughed so freely, the last time he had enjoyed someone's company so thoroughly. Lillian was quick-witted and funny, with a way of seeing the world that both charmed and challenged him. When darkness fell, they ate a simple supper of beans and cornbread, and Nathan told stories about his cattle and the various predicaments they had gotten themselves into. Lillian laughed until tears ran down her face at his description of a particularly stubborn bull who had decided to take up residence in a neighbor's yard and refused to be moved for 3 days. You are making that up, Lillian accused, still giggling. I swear it is true, Nathan said, holding up his hand. Ask anyone in Sierra Vista. They will tell you about that damned bull and how he ate every flower in Mrs. Patterson's garden before we finally got him out. As the evening grew late, Nathan found himself reluctant for it to end. But Lillian was yawning despite her efforts to hide it, and he knew she needed rest. "You take the bed again," he said when she started to protest. "I will hear no arguments." "You have been too kind," Lillian said, standing. She hesitated, then stepped closer to him. "Nathan, I want you to know that these past hours have meant a great deal to me. I have felt more like myself, more free than I have in years." "I am glad," Nathan said, his voice rough. She was standing so close he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes, could count the freckles across her nose. "I feel like I should be honest with you," Lillian continued. "When you said I should wait until tomorrow to leave, I was relieved. I did not want to go. I still do not want to go." Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. "Lillian," he began, not sure what he meant to say. She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his rough cheek. "I know this is fast, that we have only just met. I know I should not feel this way, not after everything that has just happened. But I cannot deny that there is something here, something I have never felt before." "I feel it too," Nathan admitted, covering her hand with his own. "But you have been through so much. You are vulnerable right now, and I do not want to take advantage of that." "You are not taking advantage," Lillian said firmly. "I am telling you how I feel. That is my choice." "And what about tomorrow?" Nathan asked. "What about your aunt and your future? You came here to start fresh, not to get tangled up with a cowboy who barely makes enough to keep his ranch running." "Maybe getting tangled up with you is exactly what I need," Lillian said with a small smile. "Maybe that is the fresh start I was looking for." Nathan wanted to believe her, wanted to pull her into his arms and kiss her until neither of them could think straight. But he forced himself to step back, to put space between them. "Sleep on it," he said. "If you still feel this way in the morning, we will talk. But I will not let you make a decision like this when you are tired and overwhelmed." Lillian looked disappointed, but she nodded. "You are a good man, Nathan Early," she said softly. "Better than any I have known." She went to bed, and Nathan returned to his spot by the fire, but sleep was impossible. His mind raced with possibilities and fears. What if she did still feel the same in the morning? What if she did not? What if he was throwing away his only chance at happiness by being cautious? What if he was setting himself up for heartbreak by hoping at all? He must have dozed eventually, because he woke to find morning light streaming through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. Sitting up, he saw Lillian already dressed in her own clothes, which had dried overnight. She had combed her hair and tied it back, and she looked beautiful in the golden morning light. "I let you sleep," she said, smiling at him. "You looked like you needed it." Nathan stood, running a hand through his hair, suddenly conscious of how he must look. "I should have been up earlier," he said. "Nonsense," Lillian replied. "You have been sleeping on the floor for 2 nights because of me. The least I could do was let you rest." She handed him a cup of coffee, and their fingers touched as he took it. The contact sent electricity up his arm, and from the way her breath caught, she felt it too. "Did you sleep on it?" Nathan asked quietly. "I did," Lillian said, meeting his eyes steadily. "And I still feel the same, more sure if anything." Nathan set down his coffee and took both her hands in his. "I need you to understand something," he said. "I have nothing to offer you but this cabin and my ranch. I will never be wealthy. Life here is hard work, every single day. I cannot give you the kind of life you had in Tucson." "I do not want the life I had in Tucson," Lillian said. "I want a life that means something, with someone who sees me as more than a means to an end. I want to wake up every morning and know that I am valued for who I am, not what I represent." She squeezed his hands. "I think I could have that with you if you will take a chance on me." "Take a chance on you," Nathan repeated, almost laughing. "Lillian, you are the one taking a chance. You barely know me. What if you get to know me better and decide I am not what you want?" "Then I will cross that bridge when I come to it," Lillian said. "But I do not think that will happen. I think I already know the important things about you. I know you are kind and generous. I know you work hard and value honesty. I know you make me laugh and make me feel safe. What else do I need to know? Nathan could not fight it anymore. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and it felt like coming home. She melted against him, her arms wrapping around his neck, and for a long moment the world consisted of nothing but the two of them and the connection sparking between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Nathan rested his forehead against hers. "This is crazy," he said. "Maybe," Lillian agreed, "but it feels right." "What about your aunt?" Nathan asked. "What about your father?" "I still need to go to Aunt Catherine," Lillian said. "I need to explain what happened, and I need to stay with her for a while. It would not be proper for me to stay here unchaperoned, not if we are courting." "Courting," Nathan repeated, liking the sound of it. "Unless you have a better word for it," Lillian asked, a teasing note in her voice. "Courting works," Nathan said, grinning. "Though I have to warn you, I am out of practice. It has been a long time since I courted anyone." "We will figure it out together," Lillian said. They spent the morning preparing for her departure, both moving slowly, reluctant for the moment to arrive. Nathan saddled Daisy while Lillian changed back into her riding clothes, which were stiff from drying but at least clean. When she emerged, Nathan had to force himself not to ask her to stay, to point out that the ground was still muddy, that it might not be safe. But he knew she needed to go. They both needed time to think, to make sure this was real and not just the intensity of the storm and the situation throwing them together. "I will come visit you at your aunt's ranch in a few days," Nathan said as he helped her mount. "If that is acceptable." "It is more than acceptable," Lillian said, looking down at him from the saddle. "It is exactly what I want." Nathan handed her the reins, his hand lingering on hers. "Be careful on the trail. Watch for washouts and do not push Daisy too hard. Your aunt's ranch is about 3 hours from here if you take it slow." "I will be careful," Lillian promised. "Nathan, thank you for everything." "No need to thank me," Nathan said. "Letting you sleep in my cabin during the storm was the easy part. By morning, I knew I would never be alone again, not really. You have changed something in me, Lillian Vance." Tears sparkled in her eyes. "You have changed something in me too," she said softly. They looked at each other for a long moment, and Nathan committed the image to memory, this beautiful, brave woman on her horse, morning light turning her hair to mahogany, eyes bright with unshed tears and hope. "Go on," he said gently, "before I convince you to stay." Lillian nodded and turned Daisy toward the trail. Nathan watched her ride away until she disappeared over a rise, and only then did he return to his cabin. It felt unbearably empty without her, the silence oppressive after 2 days of conversation and laughter. He tried to distract himself with work, checking on his cattle and mending a section of fence that had come loose in the storm, but his mind kept drifting back to Lillian. Had he just made the biggest mistake of his life by letting her go? Or was he being smart, giving them both time to think clearly? He could not shake the feeling that she was already a part of him, that in 2 short days she had become essential in a way he had never expected. 3 days, Nathan told himself. He would give her 3 days to settle in with her aunt, and then he would ride to the Vance ranch and see if she still felt the same. 3 days to determine the rest of his life. Those 3 days were the longest of Nathan's life. He threw himself into work, rising before dawn and laboring until darkness forced him to stop. He repaired everything that needed repairing and several things that did not. He checked his cattle so many times they probably thought he had lost his mind. Anything to keep busy, to keep from thinking about Lillian and wondering if she had changed her mind. On the evening of the 3rd day, Nathan bathed and put on his cleanest shirt and least worn trousers. He shaved carefully and even attempted to tame his hair with water, though it refused to cooperate. As he saddled his horse, his hands shook slightly. He could not remember the last time he had been this nervous. The ride to the Vance ranch took just over an hour. As he approached, Nathan was impressed despite himself. The ranch was everything people said it was, sprawling and prosperous, with well-maintained buildings and healthy-looking cattle. The main house was large and painted white, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front and sides. Nathan tied his horse at the hitching post and climbed the steps to the front door, his heart hammering. He knocked, and after a moment the door opened to reveal a woman in her 50s with shrewd eyes and graying hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked Nathan up and down with an assessing gaze that made him want to stand straighter. "You must be Nathan Early," she said. "Yes, madam," Nathan replied, taken aback. "How did you know?" "My niece has spoken of little else since she arrived," Catherine Vance said dryly. "You might as well come in." Nathan followed her into a spacious parlor furnished with comfortable chairs and a large fireplace. "Lillian is upstairs changing for supper," Catherine said, gesturing for Nathan to sit. "She will be down shortly. In the meantime, you and I can have a conversation." Nathan sat, feeling like he was facing a judge. Catherine settled into a chair across from him and fixed him with that penetrating stare. "My niece tells me you took her in during the storm, gave her shelter and asked for nothing in return," Catherine began. "She also tells me that in 2 days she became convinced she wants to pursue a courtship with you. What do you have to say about that?" "I say that I feel the same way," Nathan replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "I know it seems fast, but sometimes you just know." "Do you know what she is running from?" Catherine asked. "Do you know about the broken engagement?" "She told me," Nathan said. "And I think she was right to leave." "So do I," Catherine said, surprising him. "Her father is a fool and the man she was engaged to is worse. But that does not mean I will stand by and watch her jump from one bad situation into another." She leaned forward. "What are your intentions toward my niece, Mr. Early?" "To court her properly," Nathan said. "To get to know her better and let her know me. And if we still feel the same after a reasonable time, to ask her to marry me." "And what can you offer her?" Catherine pressed. "Lillian is used to a certain standard of living." "I have a small ranch, 50 acres and about 30 head of cattle," Nathan said. "It is not much, but it is mine, and it supports me well enough. I can offer her a simple life, hard work, and my complete devotion. I cannot offer her wealth or luxury." "Lillian does not want wealth or luxury," Catherine said. "If she did, she would have married that useless boy in Tucson. But I need to know that you can provide for her, that she will not go hungry or cold." "She will not," Nathan promised. "I would work myself to death before I would let her suffer." Catherine studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I believe you," she said. "And for what it is worth, I like you, Mr. Early. You have honest eyes and you speak plainly. Those are rare qualities." "Thank you, madam," Nathan said, relief washing through him. "However," Catherine continued, "I will not have Lillian's reputation damaged by an improper courtship. You may call on her here at the ranch, and she may visit you with a chaperone present." "Is that understood?" "Completely," Nathan agreed. "Good. Now," Catherine's stern expression softened slightly, "Lillian also told me that you have been working your ranch alone. I have several experienced hands who could help you expand your operation if you are interested. Consider it an investment in my niece's future." Nathan hesitated. "That is generous, but I prefer to make my own way." "Pride is admirable, but foolish pride is not," Catherine said bluntly. "If you are serious about providing for Lillian, you need to think practically. I'm not offering charity. I am offering business advice. My ranch hands will teach you methods that could double your herd in 2 years. What you do with that knowledge is up to you." Before Nathan could respond, he heard footsteps on the stairs, and then Lillian appeared in the doorway. She wore a simple green dress that matched her eyes, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. Nathan stood, suddenly unable to speak. "Nathan," she said, her face lighting up. "You came." "I said I would," Nathan replied, finding his voice. Catherine stood as well. "I will leave you two to visit," she said. "I will be in the kitchen if you need me. Remember, the door stays open." "Yes, Aunt Catherine," Lillian said, though her eyes never left Nathan. As soon as Catherine was gone, Lillian crossed the room and took Nathan's hands. "I have missed you," she said. "These 3 days have felt like an eternity." "For me too," Nathan admitted. "I must have checked on my cattle 100 times just to have something to do." Lillian laughed, and the sound washed over Nathan like sunshine. They sat together on the sofa, hands still clasped, and talked for hours. Lillian told him about arriving at the ranch, about Catherine's reaction to her story, about how her aunt had immediately written to Lillian's father expressing her displeasure at how the situation had been handled. "She was furious," Lillian said. "I have never seen her so angry. She told me that my father had no right to try to force me into a loveless marriage, that she would support me in whatever I decided to do." "She seems like a formidable woman," Nathan observed. "She is," Lillian agreed, "but she is also kind. She said I could stay here as long as I needed, that she would be happy to have me." She paused. "But I do not want to impose on her forever. I want to have my own life, my own home." "With me?" Nathan asked quietly. "If you will have me," Lillian said, squeezing his hands. "I know 3 days is not long enough to be certain, but I am more sure now than I was then. You are what I want, Nathan. A simple life, honest work, and a man who values me for who I am. That is all I have ever wanted." Nathan pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. "I am not an easy man to live with," he warned. "I get focused on work and forget to eat. I am stubborn as that bull I told you about, and my cabin is small and drafty in winter." "I do not care about any of that," Lillian said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I just want to be with you." They stayed like that until Catherine called them for supper, and Nathan found himself sitting at a proper dining table for the first time in months. Catherine questioned him throughout the meal, asking about his cattle, his methods, his plans for the future. Nathan answered honestly, and he could see approval growing in the older woman's eyes. After supper, Nathan reluctantly took his leave. As he mounted his horse, Lillian walked out with him, standing in the circle of lamplight from the porch. "When can I see you again?" she asked. "I will come back in 2 days," Nathan promised. "And maybe you can come visit my ranch next week if your aunt will allow it." "She will," Lillian said confidently, "especially if she comes as chaperone." Nathan leaned down from his saddle and kissed her gently. "2 days," he repeated. 2 days, Lillian agreed. The ride home felt shorter somehow, and Nathan's heart felt lighter than it had in years. He had been alone for so long, had convinced himself he preferred it that way. But Lillian had shown him what he had been missing, what life could be with the right person by your side. Over the following weeks, Nathan and Lillian settled into a pattern. He would visit her at the Vance ranch several times a week, and she would come to his cabin with Catherine as chaperone. They worked side by side, Lillian proving herself capable with horses and cattle. Nathan watched her rope a calf one afternoon with skill that impressed even Catherine's experienced hands. "Where did you learn that?" Nathan asked, grinning. "I told you I spent summers here as a child," Lillian said, coiling her rope. "Aunt Catherine made sure I learned every aspect of ranch work. She said a woman should be able to run a ranch as well as any man." "She is right," Nathan said. True to her word, Catherine sent several of her ranch hands to help Nathan. They taught him breeding techniques and grazing patterns that could maximize his land. Under their guidance, Nathan began making improvements to his operation. His herd grew, and with it, his profits. But more important than any of that was what grew between Nathan and Lillian. With each passing week, they learned more about each other. Nathan discovered that Lillian sang while she worked, old songs her mother had taught her. She learned that Nathan could barely read and offered to teach him, spending evenings by lamplight helping him sound out words from the newspaper. "Why did you never learn properly?" Lillian asked one evening, patient as always as he struggled with a particularly difficult passage. "There was no school where I grew up," Nathan explained, "and after my parents died, I was too busy surviving to worry about reading." "Well, you are doing wonderfully now," Lillian said, squeezing his hand. "You are one of the smartest men I know, educated or not." Catherine watched their courtship with approval that grew more obvious each day. One evening, about 2 months after that fateful storm, she asked to speak with Nathan privately. "I am going to Tucson next week," Catherine said. "Lillian's father has requested that I bring her for a visit. He wants to apologize and discuss her future." Nathan felt his stomach drop. "Is she going?" "She is still deciding," Catherine said. "But I wanted you to know that whatever happens, I support this match. You are a good man, Nathan, and you make my niece happy. That is all that matters to me." "Thank you," Nathan said. "That means a great deal." "However," Catherine continued, "if you intend to ask Lillian to marry you, you might want to do it before we leave for Tucson. Give her something concrete to hold onto when she faces her father." Nathan had been thinking about proposing for weeks, but had worried it was too soon. Now, hearing Catherine's advice, he realized she was right. He needed to show Lillian that he was committed, that he wanted a future with her no matter what her father said. "I will," Nathan promised. The next day, Nathan rode into Sierra Vista and visited the only jewelry store in town. He could not afford much, but he found a simple gold band with a small emerald that reminded him of Lillian's eyes. It took most of his savings, but he did not hesitate. That evening he asked Lillian to take a walk with him, and Catherine agreed, watching from the porch as they strolled toward the barn. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "It is beautiful," Lillian said, leaning against the fence and watching the colors shift. "Not as beautiful as you," Nathan said, and when she turned to him, laughing at the obvious flattery, he dropped to one knee. Lillian's laughter stopped abruptly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Lillian Vance," Nathan began, his heart pounding. "I know we have not known each other long. I know some would say we are rushing into this, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are the missing piece I did not know I was looking for. You are brave and kind and funny, and you make me want to be better than I am. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how much. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Lillian's face as she nodded. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Nathan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed as the sun set behind them, and Nathan felt complete in a way he never had before. When they returned to the house, Catherine took one look at them and smiled. "I see congratulations are in order," she said. "How did you know?" Lillian asked, laughing through her tears. "Please," Catherine said. "I have been expecting this for weeks. Let me see the ring." Lillian held out her hand, and Catherine examined the simple band with approval. "It is perfect," she declared. "Practical and beautiful, just like this match." Over the next few days, they made plans. The wedding would be small, held at the Vance Ranch in 3 months' time. That would give Nathan time to expand his cabin, adding a second room and making improvements to accommodate a wife. Catherine's ranch hands helped with the construction, and the work went quickly. Then came the trip to Tucson. Nathan wanted to go with them, but Lillian insisted she needed to face her father alone. "I need to stand on my own feet," she explained. "I need him to see that I am not the helpless girl he thinks I am." "I understand," Nathan said, though he hated the idea of her facing her father without support. "But if you need me, send word and I will come immediately." "I know you will," Lillian said, kissing him. "That is one of the many reasons I love you." She was gone for 2 weeks, and they were the longest 2 weeks of Nathan's life. He worked on the cabin additions obsessively, trying not to imagine what was happening in Tucson. Had her father convinced her to break off the engagement? Had he offered her enough money to change her mind? Nathan tried to have faith, but doubt crept in during the long nights. Then one afternoon, he saw riders approaching and recognized Lillian on Daisy, Catherine beside her on a magnificent black gelding. Nathan dropped his hammer and ran to meet them. Lillian dismounted before Daisy had fully stopped and threw herself into Nathan's arms. "I am back," she said, "and I am not leaving again." "What happened?" Nathan asked, holding her tight. "My father tried to convince me to come home," Lillian said, pulling back to look at him. "He offered me money, promised to find me a better match, even threatened to disown me. But I stood firm. I told him I was marrying you, that I loved you, and that nothing he could say would change my mind." "How did he react?" "He was angry at first," Lillian admitted. "But Aunt Catherine gave him a piece of her mind, and eventually he calmed down. I do not think he understands my choice, but he has agreed to respect it. He even gave us his blessing, though I suspect Aunt Catherine had something to do with that." "I may have pointed out a few home truths," Catherine said with satisfaction. "Sometimes my brother needs reminding that he does not control the entire world." "Thank you," Nathan said to Catherine, "for everything you have done for us." "Just make my niece happy," Catherine replied. "That is all the thanks I need." The next 3 months flew by in a blur of preparation and work. Nathan finished the cabin additions, creating a bedroom separate from the main living area and expanding the kitchen. It was still modest by most standards, but it was solid and well made, a home they could be proud of. Lillian helped Catherine plan the wedding, keeping it simple as both women preferred. They would exchange vows in the Vance ranch parlor, with dinner to follow for the ranch hands and neighbors. Catherine insisted on providing the food, and Lillian sewed her own dress, a simple cream-colored gown that made her look like an angel. The night before the wedding, Nathan lay awake in his cabin, unable to sleep. In less than 24 hours, Lillian would be his wife. They would start their life together in this cabin, on this land. It seemed impossible that just a few months ago he had been alone, convinced he would stay that way forever. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful. Nathan dressed in his best suit, a new purchase that had required another trip to Sierra Vista. When he arrived at the Vance Ranch, he found it transformed with wildflowers and ribbons. Catherine had spared no expense, despite the simple nature of the celebration. Then Lillian appeared at the top of the stairs, and Nathan forgot to breathe. She was radiant, her dark hair loose around her shoulders, the cream dress fitting her perfectly. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers, and she was smiling so brilliantly that Nathan felt his eyes sting with tears. Catherine walked her niece down the stairs and placed Lillian's hand in Nathan's. "Take care of her," she said quietly. "With my life," Nathan promised. The ceremony was brief, conducted by a circuit preacher who traveled through the territory. They exchanged vows and rings, Nathan sliding a matching band onto his own finger to accompany the one he had given Lillian months ago. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed her with all the love and promise he felt, and the small gathering erupted in cheers. The celebration that followed was joyful and warm. Ranch hands who had helped Nathan with his cabin offered congratulations and advice, most of it good-natured ribbing. Catherine gave a speech that managed to be both touching and practical, reminding them that marriage required work but was worth the effort. As evening fell, Nathan and Lillian said their goodbyes and rode back to their cabin, Lillian's few possessions packed on Daisy. The ride was quiet, both of them lost in thought, but it was a comfortable silence. When they reached the cabin, Nathan dismounted and helped Lillian down, then swept her into his arms to carry her over the threshold. She laughed and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Welcome home, Mrs. Early," Nathan said as he set her down inside. "Home," Lillian repeated softly, looking around the cabin with shining eyes. "I like the sound of that." Their first night as husband and wife was everything Nathan had hoped it would be, tender and passionate and full of promise. Afterward, they lay tangled together in their new bed, talking quietly about their future. "You want children?" Lillian asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "I do," Nathan said. "If you do." "I want a house full of them," Lillian said. "I want laughter and chaos and all the mess that comes with a family." "Then that is what we will have," Nathan promised, kissing the top of her head. The first year of their marriage was filled with hard work and deeper love. They worked the ranch side by side, and with Catherine's continued advice and support, they steadily expanded their operation. Nathan proved to be an apt student, implementing new techniques that improved his yield. By the end of that first year, they had 50 head of cattle and had purchased an additional 20 acres. Lillian thrived in ranch life. She was up before dawn most mornings, working alongside Nathan in the barn or the pastures. She kept a garden that provided vegetables for their table and chickens that gave them eggs. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch Nathan had built, watching the sun set over their land, and Nathan would count his blessings. 15 months after their wedding, Lillian told Nathan she was expecting a child. He was so overcome with joy that he picked her up and spun her around until she was dizzy and laughing, begging him to put her down. "We are going to be parents," Nathan said, setting her down carefully as if she might break. "I can hardly believe it." "Believe it," Lillian said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach. "In about 6 months, our family will grow." Nathan became impossibly protective during Lillian's pregnancy. He tried to prevent her from doing any heavy work, which led to their first real argument as a married couple. "I am pregnant, not fragile," Lillian said with exasperation. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while continuing to work." "I just want you to be safe," Nathan protested. "I am safe," Lillian assured him, "but I will go mad if you keep treating me like glass. Let me work, let me live, I will tell you if I need to rest." Nathan reluctantly agreed, though he continued to watch her like a hawk. Catherine visited often, bringing advice and baby clothes she had saved from when her own children were small, a fact that surprised both Nathan and Lillian. "I did not know you had children," Lillian said. "2 daughters," Catherine said, her expression sad. "They both died of fever as infants. It is why I never remarried after my husband passed. I could not bear the thought of going through that loss again." "I am so sorry," Lillian said, taking her aunt's hands. "It was a long time ago," Catherine said. "But it is why you are so precious to me, Lillian. You are the daughter I got to keep." When Lillian went into labor on a cold February morning, Nathan was terrified. Catherine had come to stay with them a week earlier, knowing the time was close, and she took charge immediately. "Boil water," she instructed Nathan. "Get clean linens. And for heaven's sake, stop looking like you are going to faint." "I am fine," Nathan lied, his face pale. "You are useless," Catherine said, but not unkindly. "Go check on the cattle or something. I will call you when the baby comes." Nathan was torn between wanting to be with Lillian and knowing he would only be in the way. In the end, he did as Catherine said, pacing outside the cabin and praying more fervently than he ever had in his life. Hours passed, and Nathan wore a path in the dirt with his pacing. Every time he heard Lillian cry out, his heart clenched. He wanted to burst through the door and demand to be let in, but Catherine had been firm. This was women's work, and he would only be a distraction. Finally, as the sun was setting, he heard a new sound. A baby crying. Nathan's legs nearly gave out with relief. He stood frozen, waiting until the cabin door opened and Catherine appeared, exhausted but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, loud son, and Lillian is doing well." Nathan did not wait to hear more. He rushed into the cabin and found Lillian in their bed, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, and her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan approached slowly, almost afraid. Lillian pulled back the blanket and Nathan saw a tiny red face, eyes squeezed shut, mouth open in a cry. The baby had a shock of dark hair and tiny fists that waved in the air. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, touching one of those small fists with his finger. The baby's hand closed around it instinctively, and Nathan felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Lillian asked. They had discussed names endlessly over the past months, unable to agree. But looking at his son now, Nathan knew exactly what he wanted to call him. "James," he said. "After your mother's father, James Early." Tears filled Lillian's eyes. "James," she repeated. "It is perfect." Nathan sat on the edge of the bed, and Lillian carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Nathan held his son with terrified reverence, amazed at how something so small could feel so monumental. This was his child, his and Lillian's, a perfect combination of both of them and something entirely new. "I love you," Nathan said to Lillian, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for everything." "I love you too," Lillian replied. "Thank you for finding me in that storm, for giving me shelter, for giving me this life." Catherine watched from the doorway, wiping her own eyes. "I will give you 3 some time alone," she said, "but I will be just outside if you need anything." The days that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and new parent anxiety. James was a healthy baby but demanding, crying frequently and sleeping in short bursts. Nathan and Lillian took turns walking him around the cabin, singing to him, trying everything they could think of to soothe him. "I do not remember signing up for this much crying," Nathan joked one night, bouncing James gently while Lillian tried to get a few hours of sleep. But despite the exhaustion, Nathan had never been happier. Watching Lillian with their son, seeing the tender way she cared for him, only deepened his love for her. And holding James, feeling the weight of his tiny body, the trust in every breath, filled Nathan with a sense of purpose he had never known. Catherine stayed for 2 weeks after the birth, helping with the cooking and cleaning so Nathan and Lillian could focus on the baby. When she finally returned to her own ranch, she made them promise to visit often and to send for her if they needed anything. As James grew, the cabin filled with new sounds. His cries became coos, then babbles, then eventually words. His first word was "Mama," which delighted Lillian, though Nathan pretended to be offended until James followed it with "Dada" a week later. The ranch continued to prosper. With Catherine's help and advice, Nathan expanded their herd and improved their land. They hired their first ranch hand when James was a year old, a young man named Tom who reminded Nathan of himself at that age, eager to learn and willing to work hard. When James was 2, Lillian told Nathan she was pregnant again. This time, Nathan was calmer, though no less excited. He knew what to expect now, knew that Lillian was strong enough to handle it. Their second child, a daughter they named Rose Catherine after the wildflowers Lillian had carried at their wedding, and the aunt who had made their life possible, was born on a beautiful spring day. She was smaller than James had been, with wispy blonde hair and her mother's green eyes. "She is going to be trouble," Catherine predicted, holding her namesake with obvious pride. "Mark my words." Catherine was right. Rose was spirited from the start, crying louder than James ever had, demanding attention with a force of will that suggested she would grow into a formidable woman. James was fascinated by his little sister, wanting to help with everything, though his help was often more hindrance than assistance. Their family continued to grow. 2 years after Rose came another son, Michael, quiet and thoughtful even as an infant. Then 2 years after that, twin girls they named Sarah and Emma, who kept Nathan and Lillian running from morning to night. The cabin, even with its additions, was bursting at the seams. Nathan began building a larger house, this one with 4 bedrooms and a proper dining room. It took 2 years to complete, built in stages as money and time allowed, but when it was finished, it was everything they needed. "Look at what we have built," Lillian said one evening, standing on the porch of their new house and watching their children play in the yard. James was 10 now, tall and serious like his father. Rose was 8, already showing signs of the beauty she would become. Michael was 6, happiest with a book in his hands. The twins were 4, identical in appearance but opposite in temperament. "We have built more than a house," Nathan said, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind. "We have built a life, a family, a legacy." "Do you ever regret it?" Lillian asked. "The quiet life you had before that storm." Nathan turned her to face him. "Not for a single second," he said firmly. "That storm brought you to me. It gave me everything I have, everything I am. I thank God for it every day." Even when the twins are screaming and James is arguing with Rose and Michael has lost another book in the barn, Lillian asked with a smile. "Especially then," Nathan said, grinning. "Because it means our house is full of life and love. What more could I want?" The years passed quickly. James grew into a fine young man, taking over more and more of the ranch work and showing a natural talent for it. Rose, as predicted, grew into a strong-willed beauty who had half the young men in the territory calling at their door. Michael surprised everyone by wanting to become a teacher, and Nathan and Lillian supported his dream, proud of his gentle nature and sharp mind. The twins, Sarah and Emma, were inseparable. Sarah the bold leader and Emma the quiet follower. Catherine remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting often and spoiling her grand nieces and nephews terribly. She eventually retired from running her own ranch, selling the land and cattle but keeping the house, where she held court like a benevolent queen. "I have lived a good life," Catherine told Nathan and Lillian one evening when the children were all in bed. She was 70 now, her hair completely gray but her mind as sharp as ever. "But I think yours might be even better. You have something I never had. You have each other, and you have this beautiful family you have created together." "We could not have done it without you," Lillian said, taking her aunt's hand. "You gave us the foundation to build on." "Nonsense," Catherine said, but she was pleased. "You two did this yourselves. I just pointed you in the right direction." When James was 20, he married a girl from Sierra Vista, a sweet-natured young woman named Alice who won over the entire family immediately. Nathan watched his eldest son stand at an altar and exchange vows, and he remembered his own wedding day, the joy and hope he had felt. Looking at James, he saw those same emotions, and he knew his son would be happy. Rose married at 22, choosing a rancher from a neighboring territory who was as strong-willed as she was. Nathan worried they would butt heads constantly, but instead, they seemed to bring out the best in each other. Their wedding was the social event of the season, with half the territory in attendance. Michael went east to attend college, returning 4 years later with a degree and a quiet determination to open a school in Sierra Vista. Nathan helped him build it, and within a year, Michael had more students than he could handle. He married one of the other teachers, a young woman from Boston with kind eyes and a love of learning. The twins were the last to leave home, both marrying in the same year at age 23. Sarah married a banker and moved to Tucson, while Emma married a doctor and stayed in Sierra Vista. Nathan and Lillian suddenly found themselves alone in their big house for the first time in decades. "It is too quiet," Lillian said one evening, looking around the empty dining room. "It is," Nathan agreed. "But look at what we have done. 5 children, all happy and settled. We have grandchildren on the way. We have built a legacy, Lillian." "I know," she said, leaning against him, "but I miss the noise sometimes." They did not stay alone for long. Grandchildren began arriving, and the house filled with noise again on Sundays when the whole family gathered for dinner. Nathan's hair turned gray, and his back began to ache from years of hard work. But he had never felt richer. Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep at age 78, leaving her remaining property to Lillian, and asking to be buried on the land she had loved. The entire territory mourned her loss, but none more than Nathan and Lillian, who owed her so much. "She gave us everything," Lillian said at the funeral, tears streaming down her face. "She gave us a chance," Nathan corrected gently. "What we did with it was up to us." As Nathan and Lillian grew older, they began to slow down. James took over most of the ranch operations, running it with the same care and dedication his father had shown. Nathan was content to advise and spend his days with Lillian, often sitting on their porch and watching the sunset as they had done for so many years. "You remember that storm?" Lillian asked one evening. They were both in their 60s now, their children grown with children of their own. "The night we met. I remember everything about that night," Nathan said, taking her hand. "I remember how frightened you looked, how brave you were. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen." "I was soaked and miserable," Lillian protested, laughing. "You were beautiful," Nathan insisted. "And I knew even then that you were going to change my life." "Did you really know that morning that you would never be alone again?" Lillian asked. "Or is that just a nice story we tell ourselves?" Nathan considered the question seriously. "I knew," he said finally. "Maybe not in my head, but in my heart. I knew you were meant to be mine, that we were meant to build this life together. That storm brought you to me, but it was our choice to hold on to each other, and I would make that choice again every single day." Lillian leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Nathan Early," she said. "I have loved you since that first morning when you made me coffee and gave me dry clothes and treated me with such kindness when you did not have to." "And I love you, Lillian Early," Nathan replied. "My whole heart, my whole life, everything I am belongs to you." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the same colors that had filled the sky on their wedding day. Around them, their land stretched out, prosperous and peaceful. In the distance, they could see James working with the cattle, continuing the legacy they had built. Inside the house, photographs lined the walls. Their children at various ages, their wedding day, Catherine looking proud at Rose's graduation from finishing school, the whole family gathered for Christmas. Each photograph told a story, marked a moment in the life they had built together. Nathan thought back to that stormy night so many years ago when a desperate woman had appeared out of the rain and changed everything. He had been content with his solitary life, or so he had thought. But Lillian had shown him what he had been missing, shown him that life was meant to be shared, that love was worth any risk. "No regrets?" Lillian asked, as if reading his thoughts. "Not a single one," Nathan said firmly. "Every choice I made led me here to you, to this life. I would not change a moment of it." As darkness fell, they finally went inside, hand in hand as they had walked for over 40 years. The house was quiet now, their children grown and gone, but it was full of love and memories. Nathan looked around at the home they had built, the life they had created, and he felt a deep sense of peace. He had been alone once, content in his solitude, unaware of what he was missing. Then a storm had brought him Lillian, and everything had changed. By morning, he had known he would never be alone again, and he had been right. They had faced everything together, the hard times and the good, the joys and the sorrows, and they had emerged stronger for it. That night, lying in bed with Lillian sleeping beside him, Nathan said a quiet prayer of thanks for the storm that had brought them together, for the love that had sustained them, for the family they had created, for every moment of this beautiful, imperfect, wonderful life. Morning would come, as it always did, bringing new challenges and new blessings. But Nathan would face it as he had faced every morning for over 40 years, with Lillian by his side, knowing that whatever came, they would face it together. He had let her sleep in his cabin during the storm. By morning, he had known he would never be alone again, and he had been right. From that day to this, through every season of their lives, they had been together. And they would continue to be for all the mornings yet to come, until the end of their days and beyond. The cowboy and the woman who had stumbled into his life on a stormy night had built something beautiful together. Not just a ranch or a family, but a love that would endure, a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. Their children would tell their children about the storm that brought Nathan and Lillian together, about the love that had grown from that chance encounter. And somewhere, Nathan liked to think, Catherine was watching over them all, satisfied that she had helped guide two lost souls toward each other, that she had given them the foundation they needed to build their dreams. The house was quiet, the night peaceful, and Nathan early closed his eyes, his wife warm beside him, knowing that he was exactly where he was meant to be.